My life and 13 and a half interactions with law enforcement. Number one, my dad plays racquetball with him. He's on the SWAT team and he looks like Captain America, only bigger, stronger. And Santa Rosa's safety is beyond question, but then suddenly he's in a cast that stretches from his chest to his feet. Number two, Kyle and I are riding our BMX bikes through a construction site, joyfully kicking over colored wooden stakes which seem put here just for this purpose when he approaches, pulls a badge out of a denim jacket and growls, "Get the fuck out of here, you little shit, and don't let me catch you here again." Later we decide his badge had to be fake because a real policeman wouldn't swear at kids like that. Number three, Eric's dad is at work, so some of us are hanging out at his house after junior high one day, lighting firecrackers. The officers arrive and ask if we were shooting guns. They draw their nightsticks, shove past us and into the house, and poke through the closets. We've just learned that this is probably illegal, but we do not protest. Number four, "I'm going to let you go," he says, handing me back my license. "I know your dad." I let out my breath and drive away, my car full of friends and light contraband, including my homemade nunchucks. I've studied my Bruce Lee, and I take them almost everywhere. I've seen too much shit by now. Number five, "Officer, I wasn't drinking. I only sort of lie. They didn't catch me, and even to a 17-year-old, a single tall can of Budweiser is barely drinking. The cops had come to the school that night loaded for bear. A neighbor had called and reported a team of computer thieves with crowbars. They arrived, guns drawn, yelling like gladiators, only to find a few teenagers sitting on picnic tables, a couple of empties in the grass. They hauled us in for curfew. My protest is for the benefit of my parents who are on the other end of this officer's phone call. He doesn't really care if I was drinking. He knows it was a dick move to collar us, and he's trying to make it sound like he's doing something productive with his night. Number six, there are two of them, both undercover. One fat, one skinny, like Disney villains. I'm about to touch a flame to a paper grocery bag filled with all the evidence Dave and I could find at our friend Tom's fraternity house when they enter the courtyard and approach. "Hold it right there, boys," says the fat one. Tom had called me just as Dave was arriving at my place for a burrito run and muttered something unintelligible. Later I would piece it together. "Vete a mi casa y quite todo." But because I wasn't accustomed to picking up the phone and receiving criminal directives in whispered Spanish, I was confused. "What, man?" "I'm in jail," he hissed. "Go to my house and destroy everything." I'm stupid and panicked enough to comply, and now the easiest sting operation in history is about to net a pair of perps and a bag full of counterfeit sports and concert tickets in various stages of production. It's game day. Thousands of spectators exiting Memorial Stadium would file past and see me cuffed in the back of the cruiser, my freshly shaved head, my Phillies blunt shirt. Dave will become a lawyer, I'll become a writer. Tom will become a Johns Hopkins anesthesiologist, but then a series of botched back surgeries will leave him disabled, on painkillers, teaching community college in Oregon, and in a series of relationships characterized by abuse and violence. 2 will go too far. 6 of 11 charges will stick. He'll be 63 when he gets out. Number 7. I'm waiting for a train at a sidewalk cafe in Aswan, Egypt, when a tall, thin man with leathery skin asks if he can join me. He begins in halting English. We establish that he is a local officer and that I am a student. "Do you study karate?" he asks. "Yes," I say. "It is actually taekwondo, but this doesn't seem like the time for technicalities." "Do you love your teacher?" he asks. I think of Dr. Ken Min and his 30-plus degrees of black belts, who fled North Korea on foot when he was 15 and supported his family by wrestling for sacks of rice. "Yes," I say. He nods, our search for commonality accomplished with surprising ease. Number 8. I'm exhausted, only just barely rehydrated, but just with it enough to appreciate the unique experience of watching my own car get pulled over from the vantage point of the cruiser's back seat. Number 9, another back seat, but this time I've been invited to bring my beer. I'd been wandering the streets of Dubrovnik, getting drunk with a Canadian schoolteacher and a sickly Estonian when we'd gotten lost. The patrolman found us and offered us a ride back to the old city. They're about our age, all smiles, probably an hour or two from beers of their own. Number 10. He's in a good mood now, chatting about his work on the drug task force as he drives me to county, a felony-sized bag of marijuana on his floorboards. If I were a savvy criminal instead of a nauseous 22-year-old, I'd be able to see his mishandling of everything up to this point. His false pretense for pulling me over, his failure to accept my repeated refusals to let him search my car. After a long stalemate that played out on the shoulder of I-70 just east of St. Louis, I'd finally caved when he threatened to call in the dogs. A lawyer will make all this disappear with a phone call, but not for some time. For now, all of my worldly possessions have been ransacked and impounded. I'll spend the day wearing orange in a holding cell with a couple dozen other men, listening to the stories of their ruined lives. I'll eat undercooked beans and burnt cornbread, and I'll shit in a stall with no door. My parents will wire bail just before nightfall, and I'll spend the night in a nearby motel, watching monster trucks on TV, loud sex in the next room. Number 11. Fuck, butthead, Harold says. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've known Harold since our 7th grade wrestling team. Me in the second to lightest weight class, him at heavyweight. Now he has 3 daughters under the age of 6, a commute from Santa Rosa, and constant overtime in response to the Occupy movement. He's always called me Butthead, both because my last name demands it and as a memento of our time spent watching the MTV cartoon. He's told me stories of responding to gunfire and being unable to do anything but hold the victim as she bled out. In recent weeks, he's had to pull his gun twice, once when he was off duty, pumping gas. He's in counseling, but he needs more. He's not sleeping. All I can say is that I'm grateful there are people like him to do this job. By people like him, I just mean people other than me. Deep down, I know he's no better equipped for this shit than I am. Number 12. McGruff is here, but he's never introduced, and he never moves, just stands in the shadows in his threadbare mask, emanating terror through the theater. I feel awful for my 3-year-old son, who's in the front row between my wife and me, collecting a lifetime of nightmare material. A bicycle officer is on stage talking about public safety. On his way down the stairs, carrying his bike, he loses his balance and begins to tip over right onto us. I leap up to brace him, but he rights himself. I got it, he snaps. Number 13. 3 officers stand in my front yard. On a chair on my porch sits Hasim, an elderly Turkish gentleman sipping a glass of ice water. He knows he used to be a professor of engineering, but he doesn't know where he lives or whom he's supposed to be with, and he's embarrassed. I'd found him in the street, lost, obviously confused, muttering about car rentals. I brought him home, got him some shade and a drink, and called the police, who arrived a minute later. They had already been canvassing the neighborhood for him. When they arrive, he thinks he's in trouble, but then he grasps the situation and he relaxes. This is such a nice town, he says. One of the officers gestures towards me. You should be thankful we have people like him here, he says. 13 and a half. Postscript. My friend Harold called me last week to congratulate me on the release of my book. He's been promoted to plainclothes investigator and he's off the street. He and his wife Shannon will welcome their 4th, a boy, next month.
Signal to noise. Stop, Tata. Stop right here, my son announces, as we return home from a long evening walk. He walks to the edge of yet another garden, stretching out his arms as if to hug someone invisible. Hello, flowers, he announces. With his face, he caresses calla lilies, lavender, even the dandelions blooming in the gutter. He whispers to them, it takes some time. A secret between him and the flowers. When an understanding is reached, he stands up and announces loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Thank you, flowers. Good night." "Come on, Nietzsche. Let's go home. That's enough," I say, impatient, turning to go. "Shh," the response as we walk away. "What are they saying to you?" "Shh. You talk too much. You are noise."